Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Rosie.
And this is our second time recording this episode because I'm an idiot. And I forgot to turn on Rosie's mic.
You're not an idiot. You're just a little annoying.
I understand why you're frustrated, and I'm very sorry.
Thank you.
So we're just going to jump right into it. But first, we're going to share a review from one of our lovely listeners in Canada. On Apple Podcasts, their name is Joy0321, and it's called An Easygoing Listen.
It says, Rosie and Ryan are doing an awesome job. I've been listening to this podcast for about 1 year. They have always shared the stories with incredible heart and compassion, but each week they mature into better, more confident hosts. When I first tried listening, I was used to a very high-energy true crime podcast style from Red Handed and Crime Junkie. It took me a few episodes to get used to R&R's laid-back style and sometimes uncomfortable pronunciation. But then I started to understand their personalities and found it gave their show a natural, low-key vibe. I find their voices relaxing, and they just seem like genuine, kind people who are doing the show because they care. Huge bonus, they're animal lovers, and sometimes you can hear their rescue cats in the background. I love that, and I'm not even a cat person. Keep up the great work, you two.
Thank you so much. And this is the part that makes me the saddest about us losing our last recording, is that I'm not even kidding. Last time Rosie read this, when she said the animal lover sentence and that you can sometimes hear the cats in the background, Burrito walked in as if on cue with his ball in his mouth and said hi. And I'm really sad we lost it. Maybe I'll insert a clip of that moment just
from the old recording?
Yeah, just my microphone.
So you know we're not lying.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Joy0321. We really appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we like to have a chill vibe on here, like Vibe Cat.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't seen the Vibe and Cat meme, highly recommend it. It's very nice, especially if you like cats.
I like to have a chill vibe, like I'm always listening to Bob Marley in my head.
This episode of Voice of the Victim podcast is supported by Best Fiends. We all have a lot of crazy stuff on our minds right now, but one of my favorite ways to get my mind off of all that is by playing Best Fiends. You've heard us talk about it. It's a very fun game, and because of that, it's very popular, with over 100 million global downloads. So if you haven't yet, maybe it's time you jump on the wagon. Best Fiends has found a way to be both very engaging and challenging, while also feeling laid back and casual, because none of us need more stress right now. So Rosie, will you explain Best Fiends to our listeners, just in case they haven't heard of it?
The best way I can explain Best Fiends is a really laid-back puzzle game, and instead of doing fruit or bling, you're using little bugs as your allies, and you're making matches with different flowers or leaves or even mushrooms. Super cute.
Something I really appreciate about Best Fiends is the music. It's got a very epic feel that makes you, just feel like you're really accomplishing something when you beat a level. I'm a music guy. I really appreciate all the different ways that music can be used. And the way this music can amp you up and just make you feel triumphant while at the same time getting you really into it is exciting.
Or hearing Slugmageddon when you get a ton of leaves in a row.
Yes, that is satisfying. Another cool thing is that it never gets old because they update the game every month with new events. And you don't even need to be connected to the internet to progress through the game. So engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust me, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must-play. Download Best Fiends for free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get into tonight's story. Tonight we're talking about Brittney Brashers. So Rosie, are you ready to do this again?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right.
Brittney Brashers was born on May 6, 1987 to Barry and Suzanne Brashers in Peoria, Colorado.
And Peoria is a very small town, unincorporated, and it's about an hour east of Denver, Colorado.
She had a brother, John, named after their paternal grandfather, and a sister named Sarah. Brittney was very close with her mother, and the two of them loved to adventure together outdoors, and Suzanne was Brittney's best friend and closest confidant.
Yeah, they were very good friends, but Suzanne had been battling cancer, And when Brittney was just 17 years old, her mom passed away. And she took it pretty hard.
Brittney was devastated after losing her best friend and mother all at once. And she started doing things she hadn't done before in the past.
Yeah, she started hanging out with a crowd that her dad was not a fan of. They apparently partied a lot.
In 2005, she graduated from Farmington High School, and for a while she continued to party a lot. But when she turned 20, Brittney decided she wanted to turn things around and get back on the right track. So she signed up for the U.S. Air Force.
And this was a huge relief to her father, who had been worried about her ever since Suzanne died.
This is quite the 180, from partying and drinking to all of a sudden U.S. Air Force.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can party in the Air Force as long as you're getting your job done, right?
True, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Brittney began working as a technician at an Air Force dental lab in Colorado Springs. According to her boss, she was one of their top performers.
On top of all that, she was also a very likable person and got along with everyone, earning a reputation of always doing what she could to help other people.
In February 2009, she was deployed to Iraq to work in a non-combat security position. She actually received an achievement medal for her service during that time. And while she was there, she met a man named Robbie Walters, who was attracted to Brittney's free-spirited and energetic personality.
Yeah, and she was like a perfect balance, it seems like. She was free-spirited, and she also knew how to get stuff done and was very driven. So that's very cool. And Robbie was kind of the equivalent of a class clown on the base. He always tried to make people laugh. But in July of 2009, he got into some trouble. His rambunctious behavior led him to getting kicked out of the service.
Ugh. Around the same time, Brittney returned to Colorado after serving 4 months in Iraq. And Robbie actually ended up relocating from his home in California to Colorado to be closer to Brittney.
But about a month after she returned, people started to notice a change in her.
So it's safe to say that they were a pretty hot item at that time.
Yeah, it seems like it.
She was becoming more quiet and withdrawn, and Brittney would call in sick a lot or show up late to work. According to her best friend at the time, Tiffany Peoples, Brittney had started pushing her away.
Yeah, so people could tell that she wasn't acting herself. But let's fast forward to fall of 2009. Around that time, Brittney joined an all-girl football league who played 8-on-8, full-on tackle football games together.
So how is this compared to like a regular guys football team? Pretty comparable, you think?
Yeah, pretty much. On a standard football team, there's 11 guys on each team on the field at once, so it's a little smaller, but the fact that they're playing full tackle, also they invested in equipment, like helmets and shoulder pads and all that, so they're pretty serious.
On November 16th, 2009, the Football League had a photo shoot set up at a nightclub to get shots to use in promotional materials they planned on making. And during the photo shoot, the girls were trying out different poses, trying to look alluring for potential customers of their new league. One of these poses involved all the girls taking off their tops but covering each other's breasts with props or hands so nothing was actually showing in the photos.
Yeah, so very risque, which was their goal. I'm guessing they were hoping to sell tickets to their games or something with these photos, but you know, I think it definitely has a market. Everyone's into what they're into.
You think there's a market here, huh?
Oh, don't pretend you wouldn't want to go.
What?
Come on, you don't think so?
No. I don't know. Maybe if it had to do with something other than football. Football's boring.
It sounds like they knew what they were doing, and they knew how to use what they had to sell tickets. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But it turns out, at this photo shoot, Robbie was actually there. And apparently, he started taking pictures with his phone during this part of the photo shoot, which seems a little creepy. But he also appeared to be crying. Oh,
that's weird.
Yeah, very weird. So it's hard to tell if he was enjoying what was happening or if it was upsetting to him. I don't know. When this photo shoot ended shortly after midnight, Robbie and Brittney left together. but they had both been drinking at the nightclub. And this is when something tragic happened.
At about 1:40 a.m., November 17th, 2009, a man named Steve Sanchez, who lived in Denver, heard a loud bang outside of his house. He jumped up and ran outside to find a car wrecked on the street. Steve immediately called 911. As he approached the wreck, he described the scene to the operator.
Now, we just want to give you a quick warning. This is really disturbing, so listener discretion is advised.
Steve told the operator that a woman was in the driver's seat of the wreck, and a man was holding her in his arms, shaking her and calling her name. Brittney! Brittney! And she was covered in blood.
Now, Steve actually intervened and told the man he should stop shaking her. And then the man looked up in shock, and he just looked horrified over what had just happened. It was pretty obvious this man was Robbie Walters, and the woman was Brittney Brashers.
Robbie was still wearing his seatbelt, but Brittney's wasn't on.
Yeah, sadly, Brittney didn't survive this wreck. And later toxicology reports confirmed that her blood alcohol level was above the legal limit. So it seemed pretty obvious what had happened here.
Around 2 a.m., Brittney's father, Barry, received a phone call which delivered the worst news you could get as a parent. His little girl was in a wreck and hospitalized. Immediately, Barry called the hospital where she was, and they told him that she didn't make it.
This is one of my biggest fears, is getting some kind of news like this about a loved one. I can't imagine how much it would destroy me. But it's sad that they put him through 2 different phone calls to get to that news. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you tell someone their kid's in an accident, but that they're in the hospital, it kind of gets their hopes up that they're going to be okay, you know? So having to call the hospital and then find out she was dead had to be devastating.
I'm just thinking maybe they weren't allowed to say that she had passed away if she was legally declared dead at the hospital. Maybe that's why.
I suppose, but oh my gosh. Anyway, when Barry started to hear the details of this car wreck, a few things just weren't adding up to him.
First, he couldn't believe that Brittney hadn't been wearing a seatbelt. He was positive that this is something Brittney would never do. Another thing was where the crash happened. It was on a dead-end residential street. There was no logical explanation for why Brittney would have been on this random street while on her way home from a nightclub.
But, I mean, maybe they were just so wasted that she had no idea where she was. And that's what Robbie said. He said he was so lost in the music while they were driving, he didn't even remember the car crashing. But even if they did end up there because they were too drunk to know where they were, more questions came up during the post-mortem medical examination or autopsy.
Despite being in this seemingly fatal car crash and losing her life, Brittney didn't have any significant injuries to any limbs, internal organs, neck, spinal cord, skull, or brain.
So this is odd because if a car wreck's bad enough to kill you, you would think that one of these areas would have some significant damage.
One or all.
Yeah, but not in this case. So that's a huge red flag. But another red flag was the injuries that Brittney did have.
The examiner found pinpoint hemorrhages on the skin of her face and around her eyes. And these weren't common injuries in car accidents, but they were common in suffocation or strangling.
Well, maybe when the car crashed, she got knocked out and ended up in an awkward position that cut off her airway, and she was too drunk for her body to, kick into the mode where it forces you to start breathing. I don't know. It does happen when people are really drunk and can end up dying in their sleep because they can't breathe and they're stuck in some kind of position where they can't breathe. So it's a possibility.
Something came up that made it difficult for the doctor to tell whether this was strangulation or some other asphyxiation not caused by strangulation. It turns out that Brittney was born without a particular piece of cartilage in her throat. In most cases, examiners can tell if someone was strangled because that cartilage is broken. But Brittney didn't have it in the first place.
So the mysteries continued to thicken as this wreck was investigated, and with no physical evidence that Brittney was strangled, the examiner Dr. Carver listed her cause of death as undetermined, which has to be the most frustrating outcome for if you lose a loved one in death and their cause of death is listed as undetermined. I can't imagine how frustrating that would be. But it's also very odd for the victim of a car wreck to have an undetermined cause of death. So now let's talk more about who the man was in the car with Brittney at the time she died.
Okay. Well, according to Brittney's friend Tiffany, the summer after they returned from Iraq, Robbie's behavior was becoming erratic.
Tiffany started becoming really annoyed with Robbie for the things that he would do. She says that at one point while he was driving with Brittney, he stopped the car in the middle of a 4-lane highway, took the keys, got out, and ran off, so leaving Brittney in the passenger seat. Obviously, that's really strange, but Robbie denies that ever happened.
It's weird because that's a weird thing to make up and say that someone did.
Right?
But it's also even weirder when you think of someone actually doing it in a 4-lane highway, taking the keys and leaving.
I know.
I don't know how much more dangerous you can get.
Yeah, it's very careless. He denied it, but as we'll discuss, Robbie denies a lot of things.
And Tiffany was getting frustrated that Brittney was staying with Robbie, despite all this crap that he was doing. When she asked Brittney why she stayed with him, Brittney said that she loved him.
Yeah, so if he's doing stupid crap like this and she still says this,
yeah,
there's some gaslighting going on there. But based on what happened on October 24th, 2009, which we're about to talk about, we can get a much fuller picture of their relationship and exactly the kind of position Brittney was in.
That day, Brittney and Robbie got into a huge fight. Robbie ended up hitting Brittney during the fight, leaving her bruised. Thankfully, she reported him, and he was arrested. During her report, she ended up telling police that he made a threat to her that he would cause her to have a car accident.
So that's pretty heavy. I mean, how much more on the nose can you get? But they're still missing any kind of evidence or proof.
Right, at that point. After that, Brittney's boss at the Air Force lab issued a formal no-contact order on Brittney and Robbie, forbidding them to see each other. If she did have contact with him again after this, she could get kicked out of the Air Force herself.
Yeah. Now, according to Tiffany, Brittney told her that she had completely broken up with Robbie after this and was done with him. So it's very odd that he had accompanied her to that photo shoot that day and was also in the car at the time of the accident.
Sometimes when people tell you you're forbidden to see someone, it just makes you more magnetized. Magnetized to them.
Yeah, very true, especially with teenagers. And these people are in their very low 20s, so pretty much, pretty close to still teenagers.
Well, Robbie was put in jail, but clearly not for long, as he was out by mid-November when he was with Brittney again in that car. Understandably, when Tiffany learned that Robbie was in the car with Brittney the night she died, she was very convinced that something wasn't right.
But there was another huge piece to this puzzle that helped detectives get to the truth and finally find a little bit of justice for Brittney and her family.
It turns out that in January of 2009, just before going to Iraq, Robbie had gotten married to a woman named Elena. This actually came up during their time on duty because he was so obviously close to Brittney, and adultery was illegal in the Air Force.
Now, Robbie had told Brittney that his marriage was a complete sham, it was in name only, and that he'd only done it because of all the incentives the Air Force gives to be married. Basically, he did it to take advantage of the system, get extra benefits, and then he turned around and blamed the Air Force because they gave him so much incentive to do it, he just had to do it. not taking responsibility. But his relationship with his wife ended up being the key to finding the truth in this case, as we'll talk about.
Detective Bisgard was assigned to investigate the strange circumstances around the car wreck that seemed to take Brittney's life. Very early in the investigation, he learned that Robbie was married at the time he was dating Brittney. He also learned about the arrest after Robbie had physically assaulted and abused Brittney.
Now, when they searched Brittney's phone, they also found a voicemail which had been disguised as a ringtone. Apparently changed the name of it and moved it to a different folder for some reason. But this voicemail contained a very harsh message from Robbie. It was very angry, laced with profanity, and within the message, Robbie repeatedly said, "I hope you die," to Brittney.
And this is so confusing to me. Like, why wouldn't she just delete this message? Why hide it?
I don't know. Well, it could have been Robbie.
True.
Robbie could have taken her phone. Who knows?
Robbie claimed that it was right after she reported him to the police, and he was just extremely emotional at the time, insisting that he didn't mean what he said.
Yeah, and after this, the investigation came to a halt because they weren't finding any new evidence that, positively tied any of this together, and they weren't getting any more details out of Robbie.
Robbie ended up going back to his wife after Brittney's death. For 4 months they were back together, but then Robbie was part of another huge fight, this time with his wife.
Now, somehow, Detective Bisgard heard about this fight and hoped that maybe if he called Elena, she'd be willing to talk to him. He was desperate for new evidence because this case was frozen, but he didn't have high expectations because he knew he couldn't force her to talk or to incriminate her husband in any way.
Right. But he did get a hold of her, and she was very willing to talk. Actually, she had a lot to say.
Yeah, and she dropped a huge bombshell on him.
Elena said that on multiple occasions, Robbie had told her that he killed Brittney.
So, we have another one of those narcissistic idiots that thinks bragging to their partner about how violent and horrible they are is cool, just like last week.
Bizarre. Elena had actually secretly recorded over a dozen conversations with Robbie, where he gave graphic and precise details of what he did to Brittney Brashers.
Yeah, apparently at the photo shoot before Brittney died, the moment she took her top off with the rest of the league is when he decided he was going to kill her. I don't know if it was extreme jealousy or what, but it seems really ironic for a guy who's married and also has a girlfriend on the side. Another parallel from last week. What's up with these dudes having this stupid double standard? Getting upset with someone for something you're doing is just... I don't get it.
I'm still wondering how he ended up at that nightclub. If they had gotten back together after he was arrested, or if he was, stalking her.
Well, they left together, so it kind of seems like they came together.
I know, but if she was so drunk...
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Maybe he did just show up out of the blue.
Maybe he wasn't as drunk as he was putting out to be, or pretending to be.
That's another good point.
I don't know. He revealed in the recordings that while Brittney was driving them home from the nightclub, out of nowhere, he punched her in the face. Then he went on to strangle her.
Why? We don't want to get too graphic with these details, but according to the medical examiner, Dr. Carver, the details that were revealed in these recordings finally explained all of the puzzling evidence that he came across during the autopsy, which means that this version of events that he's telling in the recordings actually lined up with the physical evidence, which means it's most likely true.
I wonder if he also took off her seatbelt to make it look like that's why she passed away.
Oh, that's, another very possible thing.
Now, despite having these recordings they could use against him, the prosecution still hoped to have Elena testify at the trial.
I'm guessing to have a witness confirmation that the voice in the recordings was in fact Robbie.
But when Robbie learned that Elena had exposed his crimes, He tried to put a hit out on her using the connections he had in jail.
I don't even know why they would tell him their source of the information before the trial.
But then again, if he's got all these quote-unquote connections, maybe they told him.
Yeah, that's possible. Man, you're just coming up with all of the possibilities tonight, Rosie.
And how does one get connections in jail? I just don't understand.
Yeah, we don't want to understand the dark underbelly of society.
But we do. Up until this point, Elena was conflicted about how she felt. She was trying hard to convince herself that the things Robbie said on those recordings were just lies and just a stupid attempt Robbie made to be funny or something. She had been calling Robbie and saying that she still loved him and she wanted to prove his innocence.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And
so obviously this wasn't a incentive marriage.
Yeah.
This was real for her.
For her it was, yeah. And I can completely understand why she felt this way. Like, Rosie, if I told you that I did a bunch of horrible stuff like this, and then later I came back and told you, no, I was just kidding, wouldn't you want to believe that I was just joking that I wasn't a horrible person?
I would think you were psychotic and maybe a little bit of a horrible person, but I'd want to believe you, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Elena's situation, she wanted to believe that he was just making this up, that he just had a really dark sense of humor or something. And another factor for how she felt could also be that he was clearly a horribly abusive person. And
right.
He was probably gaslighting her, and she wasn't thinking clearly.
That's a better option for us to believe, I think.
Well, I think they work hand in hand.
Hand in hand, yeah.
Because she loved him.
Sad. Really sad.
Yeah.
But when she learned about the hit, she was ready to testify against him.
Yeah, that
thankfully
kind of cleared things up for her. If he was willing to do that, then obviously he was the terrible person that he told her he was.
Yeah.
But for me, this is the really interesting part about this case. Robbie had the same charming spell over both Elena and Brittney, and he clearly gaslighted both of them, convincing them that he was much better than he really was, even though it was obvious to people on the outside what a jerk he was. I mean, Brittney was willing to break a no-contact order for him and risk her job in the Air Force, so he obviously had some kind of control over her, and he was just a super fake person, even though he had the sick potential to kill her over some unjustified jealousy. I'm obviously no psychologist, but this guy's clearly a narcissist. And even the detective said that Robbie's one of those guys who always thinks he's the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? We all know those people. But my personal opinion is, if you do think you've got everything figured out, you're probably a fool. You can only grow into being a smart person if you have the humility to admit that you don't know everything, and you have that willingness to always trying to be learning. If you think you have it all figured out, you don't try to learn, you get dumber because you're not trying to learn. And I can say this because that's how I used to be. I used to think I was smart and that I had everything figured out, and that made me dumber because I wasn't trying to learn. But now that I am trying to learn, it's really helping. So
I'm glad you're not so dumb.
Thank you. It's an infantile mindset to have, that because I was a lot younger when I felt that way.
Yeah.
But this moron got stuck on this mindset well into adulthood because he really thought he could talk his way out of this even after admitting it to his wife.
Yeah, that is the definition of dumb.
But this is one of the reasons we talk about abuse and gaslighting and all that, because it's extremely hard to see from the inside and even harder to get out of when you're being abused. But if someone is willing and able to abuse another person, that proves that they have the potential to take a life, because they've proven they don't value other people the way they should. So I think we can all take away from this that we need to be observant, be aware of bad situations, do the best we can to look out for each other and look out for ourselves. And just try to stay safe, you know?
Right.
This is why we talk about these things, because we want them on the forefront of our mind. We don't want to be unnecessarily suspicious of anyone, but we do want to be cognizant of the warning signs. And, you know.
Nicely said.
Thank you. It came out better the second time.
Okay. Well, Brittney's family was devastated by this situation. Her brother John and sister Sarah were both so close to her and always inspired by her drive to do things and find adventure. Sarah spoke in court, sharing memories she had of her sister despite being very nervous. She overcame her nerves to share her sister's memory with the court.
Yeah. And I thought it was really touching in the 2020 episode, seeing her brother John talk about how much she inspired him and how close they were and how much he missed her. It just made me want to give him a hug. He seemed like a sweet kid. This whole family seemed so close and just emotionally tied to each other. And they had already lost the mom. They had been through so much. So anyway, that's the whole story. But Robbie Walters was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Good.
Thank goodness that he was dealt with. Still, nothing will ever balance the scales of justice for what actually happened, because all we really want is for this to never have happened. But
finally, justice is served.
Yeah.
In a case.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate all of you. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say, Rosie?
For the second time? I don't think so. Be sure to check out my new Rosie Rants Volume 1 episode. That's on Patreon for $5 and up, where I talk about Zabaleen, the trash city in Egypt, which is pretty fascinating. And also the abandoned and forbidden mica mines, where children are forced to work in these mines to put minerals in our makeup as consumers.
Yeah.
Very interesting, eye-opening. I think it's important to know where our products come from.
There's definitely a lot of things I've never thought about before. So thank you for sharing that with us, Rosie. If you are looking for more to listen to, we have 18 premium episodes over on our Patreon at the $2 level. So if you want more episodes, that's where you can find them. And also, along with what Rosie was just talking about on the $5 level, we have all kinds of other random stuff on there. We pretty much throw everything else that's not our premium episodes at the $5 level. So, yeah, go check that out if you're curious. I think you can see all the stuff that's up there without paying for it, just if you want a preview.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, we're on Instagram at VOV Podcast. We're on Facebook at Voice of the Victim Support System. And we are on TikTok and VOVpodcast@gmail.com.
We're everywhere.
Yeah. I really haven't been using TikTok much. I don't know how to incorporate it with our podcast yet. I haven't taken the time to figure out an effective way to incorporate it, but I know it can be done. Sarah Turney's done an amazing job of it, so I really need to sit down and take the time to figure it out. But if you have any ideas, definitely shoot them our way. We're always open to suggestions. If you are well-versed in TikTok. Because I know it has a weird reputation, but it definitely is a useful tool. I think it's cool. So, all right. Well, thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Bye.